A week or two ago, I saw a video on YouTube called 10 Surprising Ways to Offend People in Other Countries. Very likely video. Here's a few. In Iran and parts of the Middle East, the thumbs up signal that we use for everything's good or you're doing good, or I use to start the service with Barbara, it actually doesn't mean okay. It's actually the same as what we use our middle finger for. If you show up on time for a dinner party in Argentina, your host will be terrifically offended and think that you are greedy. Everybody knows you're actually supposed to show up no earlier than an hour late in Argentina. And then I have a question for some of our kids, like Olive or some of our little kids out there. Hey guys, are you listening up? You got me here? When you guys have soup, right, for dinner, does your mom and dad say that you're supposed to slurp the soup? Are you supposed to drink soup like that? No, I see kind of heads doing this number, but no, probably not really. No, that's not polite here. But if you're in Japan, so you guys should move to Japan, because in Japan, you're supposed to slurp your soup. And in fact, if you don't, your host will think that you don't like the soup. So actually, you can offend somebody in Japan by not slurping your soup. Other cultures, right? Other cultures, they surprise us. They challenge us, right? And maybe, just maybe, they transfigure us. Today is the feast of the Transfiguration of Jesus. But you know what? People generally don't want to be transfigured. Change is hard. And transfiguration, thinking about changing yourself, the last thing we really want to do is change ourselves. And I actually think a lot of that is pretty natural. It's understandable. The world is hard enough and has enough changes as it is without us having to go around and change ourselves. They're hard to deal with those kinds of changes. And we really are, as a people, most comfortable when we're in familiar settings, doing familiar things. And our culture gives us a lot of that comfort. Culture gives us a sense of how the world works, how the world has been, how we should behave, and how the world will be. So it does a lot of things that makes it comfortable. And for most of human history, for most of the experience for most people, culture was very comfortable. People didn't have a lot of contacts with other cultures. But that's really no longer the case. The media and the internet bring cultures from far away right into our living rooms and send our culture out into everybody else's living rooms. And globalization, it's much easier for people to move around the world. I'm not saying it's always easier, but it's much easier for people to move around the world than they used to be able to. And honestly, all around the world, I think we as a people have been having trouble with this. So you take France. In France, they're trying to ban Muslim headscarves from schools and things like that, not dealing with those immigrants particularly well. Switzerland. Actually, the Swiss, who we always tend to think of as the most peaceful, most open-minded people, just recently tried to limit immigration to their own country. And here in the U.S., we cannot, for the life of us, figure out how to fix a broken immigration system that honestly nobody on any side of the debate is happy with the immigration system. But nonetheless, we can't figure out how to fix it. And there's a near constant push for immigrants, if they do manage to come to the U.S., to become more like us. We hear this kind of all the time, rumbling around. We want them to be more like Americans in language and in customs and food, and there's that kind of pressure on immigrants to do that. So other cultures challenge us, they surprise us, and we aren't always happy fear that something essential to us might be changed. But today, we actually celebrate change. We celebrate the transfiguration of Jesus. And in many ways, what we're celebrating is a surprise. Oh, whoa, I didn't think it was going to be like that. Jesus goes up onto the mountain before his friends. I can only imagine they're thinking, all right, we'll go up, we'll do some praying, it'll be kind of the same old thing we always do with this guy. And before their eyes, he's changed. His face shines like the sun. His clothes become dazzling white. It was so impressive that the author of the letter to Peter remembered the event, calling the disciples eyewitnesses to his majesty. But I think that we miss some of the point of the story. I think we miss some of the point of the story if we fixate on Jesus. A lot of this story is about what happens to the disciples. They're surprised. They're flabbergasted. They're stunned. Peter is so freaked out that he casts about for something to do. And so you have this strange thing where he offers to set up little houses, which sounds weird when you read it, and it is kind of weird. One of my thoughts, there's a lot of various interpretations of what's going on here. One of my thoughts is that actually Peter wanted to build special booths, like the ones built at the Jewish Festival of Booths. So that was an actual festival. There's commentators may disagree with me on this, but I think that may have been what's going on. What it seems to me is like Peter has this shocking change occur before him, and he wants to take it and make it more like something that he's used to. Make it more like a religious festival, something that he has done in his culture. But I really hope that after all the shakedown occurs and the cloud and the voices and all the freaking out is over, I hope that when Jesus raised them up, they began to be changed themselves. I hope that they noticed that Jesus had been transfigured, yet he was still Jesus. He did not lose who he was. They were just able to see the glory of God that was within him. That's the power of God for change. Not to eliminate who we are. Not to eliminate the beautiful way that God already made us. But to bring us to greater glory. To help us transcend our limitations. And sometimes God does that through the other people that we meet. I also hope that when Jesus raised them up, the disciples took his words about the cross and the resurrection seriously. He says, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." I think Jesus was telling them that to understand the fullness of God's glory, that isn't going to be easy. I think he was trying to help them understand that the fullness of God's glory wasn't at that moment, and it doesn't arrive easily. The road is going to be hard. There is going to be conflict. There's going to be misunderstandings. In the case of Jesus and the authorities, some pretty epic misunderstandings. There's going to be conflict. And if the disciples didn't realize that, then they could simply see the transfiguration as some kind of a magic trick, as a fancy light show put on by God. But what Jesus is saying is that the glory of God that they were blessed to see is part of a bigger process, part of an overall process. It is part of God's transfiguration of the world. It's part of God's transformation of the whole world. A transformation that will be hard, a transformation that the world will resist, but also a transformation that cannot be stopped, not even by death. The world will always surprise us. The world is always being transfigured. Continents crash into each other. Mountains rise and fall. People create cities and empires and customs and festivals. People fill the planet with a diversity of languages, cultures, ideas, values, hopes, and dreams. And when these ideas meet, there is always the possibility of transformation. There is always the possibility of transfiguration, of becoming something more than we would be if we didn't encounter God in each other, of becoming something more than we would be individually. It's a possibility of finding the glory of God that is in all of us. Being shocked out of our comfort zone is not always bad. Not all surprises are bad. God surprised the disciples through Jesus. God did something new that they had never seen before in their culture. And they survived. They survived the surprise and spread a new faith throughout the world. And the world needs, and our community desperately needs, people who can be surprised by each other. Surprising cultural encounters are now and will continue to be part of our lives and communities, particularly part of this community. And the world needs us as a people to be able to see the transfiguration that is possible in all of those surprises and in all of those encounters. So let us be a community that can see the glory of God in surprising new ways. Let us be transfigured by God. God who comes to us in surprising ways. God who comes to us in other people.